Thank you, everyone, and thanks for joining. Thanks to all these fantastic panelists. My name is Silvia, and I'm going to be your co-host and moderator today. I am the co-founder and CEO of Mira Therapeutics, which is the company that develops the Mira app. If you don't have it already, you can download it in our website. It's miratx.app. And one of the things we do, of course, is our products to help you recover and thrive with trauma. But what we are also doing is also this series like the Trauma Talks, and as those ones, this webinar, to provide information and support and inspiration. So we have 4 fantastic panelists today. We have, let me start with Lotta. She is actually joining us from Europe. Lotta is a dancer as well and a writer. She is also a mental health advocate, and her work in this space is to bring hope and be the sparkle of other people for recovery and thriving. We have Sara. Sara is also a trauma survivor, and she has a fantastic Instagram breaking down CPTSD. That's also building a community and hope and compassion and support for, in particular, complex PTSD. Dr. Pam is a clinical psychologist and a licensed social worker, and she's specialized in religious trauma and has her practice here at the same place as Mira in New Jersey, and specializes in also LGBT environment and religious trauma, as I say. And then Dr. David Yusko, he's a specialist, clinical psychologist, a specialist in trauma exposure and prolonged exposure, national trainer on that space, specializes in anxiety disorders, PTSD, OCD, and we have had the honor to have him helping us at Mira as well. He has a practice in Pennsylvania, not too far. So thank you, everybody. This is super excited. What we want to do is to bring you some good inspiration, some ideas on how to not just survive, but also thrive through these holidays. And let's just start with first, what is it that happens? What are these feelings that we might experience or see as trauma survivors when the holiday season comes?
I have some thoughts on that. Can I share first? This is something that we're discussing in our community at Breaking Down CPTSD, which is just that often, I would say a variety of feelings show up even like weeks or months before the holidays are actually arrive. That like our bodies and emotions are almost like turning towards the holidays quite early, and that I think what I hear in my community and what my experience has been is that often it feels like a lot of internal conflict. There's a lot of conflicting feelings. I think there is like a desire to want to be like joyous and connected and like at peace and engaged, right? And that kind of thing. And yet at the same time, many of us also experience a lot of anxiety, depression, grief, pain. And it's really difficult to hold the complexity of both of those experiences going into this time of year. Maybe when we feel a lot of pressure to put on, right, a happy face for it. But it often, I mean, my experience is that when I think of the holidays and feelings, the word that shows up for me is conflict. Like it's just, there's a lot of different feelings and they kind of all seem like they are pushing against.
Yeah, so is that something that comes up to your practices? Maybe Pam and David, this is what people come up with, like, how do I deal with this conflict of, I'm supposed to be looking very happy, everybody expects me to do that, and I'm having all this other stuff going on.
Yeah, and I also think like many of these things might not be very visible for people around you. So the struggle is mostly inside unless you're having like the courage to share it with people you love and you dare to share it. But for that you need safety. So yeah, it can be a big struggle, I think, especially when trauma has happened, for example, inside a family, or that you're like being confronted with the people who are actually like your triggers or who hurt you, or and then it can be really hard also like to set boundaries. So it's, I think something to be very conscious about also, before even getting to the events with other people, like how much are you willing to be there and for how long? Mm-hmm. It takes a lot of preparation, I think.
Right. So would is sharing what's going on, all those, is sharing what you're feeling with others a good strategy? Is that helpful?
It depends on if the other person is safe. So I mean, if you can share it with someone who really is a safe person to you, it can be that other person can be like an ally. So for example, when you feel in the moment that your tension is going up and you're getting symptoms and you don't know what to do, then you can turn to the person who it feels safe to you to help you to get out of the situation, to regulate. So in that sense, it can be like safe, but if you try to communicate this with someone who doesn't understand it, it can counteract, and then it can make things even worse maybe. So it's really important to think beforehand, I think, like, is there a person in the situation who is safe enough to share this with? And if not, like how you have the strategy for, like, whatever the situation is, especially for trauma survivors, I think you always have the right to leave once it's not feeling safe. Just, it can feel like you have obligations to other people, but you're always in the right to leave once it's not safe and to go to a safe place, I think.
I think like you guys are really, the complexity that you guys are describing is really valid. And so one of the first things that I just want to be able to offer is to try to normalize and validate just how complex it is to navigate family relationships, social relationships, holidays, mainly because I try to help trauma survivors not feel embarrassed, guilty, shameful for how difficult it is to navigate these things. And so, one of the first things is just highlighting this is not easy. It's not easy for trauma survivors. It's not easy for like average human beings to navigate holidays. And so for trauma survivors, it's even that much more complicated. And given the degree of complexity, preparedness is like uber important. We have to go into these things with some degree of like a plan. Whatever it's hard to give like individual advice because so much nuance with any given person and their trauma histories and their families. But preparing, broadly speaking, for how we're going to do it, to me is, and I think what Yolanda is saying is, we got to find someone that we can talk to in order to help us plan. And that, unfortunately, is harder than you might think.
Yes, definitely.
And I think, I'll just add that I think not only maybe that safe person, whomever, it might be your therapist, it might be your friend, but hopefully that there's some safe person at the event you're going to be at too. So you can kind of give it, I don't know what, some kind of signal or an eye signal, or just that person understands, maybe that person knows you well enough to say, hey, let's go walk over here, go outside if it's, you know, or something, just to have some space. You said, Lotta, I mean, maybe, I'm not sure who said this, David, to leave if you can, it's okay. Or maybe just to go into another room. And since Sylvia asked me to speak to this specifically, I guess it feels like a good spot to maybe just speak to it. Like, if you are from some kind of faith background and there's been religious abuse, and it could be anything, I think, in that regard, from clergy sexual abuse to just someone in your faith community, maybe it's even your parents misused religion to punish you or justify your abuse, or I don't know what your circumstances are, but especially in a case like that, because we're dealing with obviously Christmas, especially, or for Jews, this is Hanukkah right now, to really, again, talk this over with a friend who understands those issues, or a therapist, or if you have that person in your life, a clergy person, if you still have that person in your life, whether it be a pastor or a rabbi, a priest, someone whom you can talk to about this. If that's not safe, it's probably going to be a therapist or a friend. But again, the point is, if you are going to even attempt to attend any kind of religious celebration, whether it be going into a church, let's say, Christmas Eve, go sit right in the back corner, maybe near the door where you can get out. Maybe just a little bit of sort of like exposure therapy to go for a few minutes. Give yourself permission to leave. Again, but make sure you have maybe someone with you who understands what you're going through. You might just want to try to, I would say people, it's like starting out slowly. You don't have to feel obligated to stay the whole time. So it's sort of not unlike what you would do at someone's house, Christmas Day or Christmas Eve, or during a Hanukkah celebration, but just go slowly. And again, always have that ally with you.
So what is the recommendation if that ally is not there with you? Should we just say, I'm not going to go?
Yeah, or maybe now, I think what I'm finding with people, and because in all kinds of religious celebration, apart from the holidays, if people want to come back to some kind of spiritual community or religious community, maybe do it online, because you can turn it on and expose yourself for 2 minutes, 1 minute, and then turn it off. Just see how it feels. But you have to make sure, you have to really work hard, I think, to do your research and make sure it's a safe place, open and affirming for LGBT community, or something that's not really fundamentalistic, or that's a whole complicated issue, depending. It's hard to make a general statement about that. But with the ability of virtual now, I think it makes some of this a little bit easier, if you don't have an ally, especially.
Sara and Lotta could probably speak to this, but I would be curious what you guys think. I want to leave on the table that not going is a total valid option.
Absolutely.
Of course. Yeah. If it's not safe, then don't go. You're not obligated to anyone to go. Like, if you don't feel like it's safe, if it's not good, then don't. And people just have to respect that. And I know that's very scary and difficult to really speak up and to really say this to the people who are expecting you. But in the end, if going is causing you like so much stress, then probably even speaking up about it and not going might be even more of a relief, even though that's also scary. So it's, yeah, I understand, like, it's also tough, like, the whole setting boundaries things and like how to do these things. And like for me personally, I remember, for example, last year due to COVID, actually a lot was cancelled. So yeah, that was kind of a like easy way to get out of it. But I must say it was very stressful, but for many other reasons also, even though I didn't have any Christmas events. And the year before that, I gave myself a very small time frame to be there. So and I even set such a strong boundary. Like, for example, I went there by bike, but it was very far, like more than an hour by bike. And I wanted to be at home before it was getting dark, which means that I only, could be there for a few hours. And then I was like, sorry, I really have to go because I don't dare to, ride my bike in the dark. So that was a really good way to really set a firm boundary and not kind of hurt other people that I was already leaving. So not make it personal. But that helped me so much that time to actually make sure that it was doable for me. And also the biking, it's movement. So that's also why I picked that to go there by bike, because for me, movement, it's such a good stress reliever and it's such a good way to connect with the body again. So yeah, that's how I did it personally. But every situation is different, so it really depends. But yeah, I think, as I said, and as also David said, like, it's really important to prepare and to, already think about it beforehand, like, how am I going to do this? And I, for example, prepare this with my therapist. And yeah, that's my safest person for these kind of things.
Yeah, I would just circle back to what David said earlier about, like, because I've done both attending, like chose to attend holiday events, like that was several years ago, and now there are some family members I have no contact with, so I don't attend.
Sarah, your microphone is going a little bit in and out.
Is this better?
Yes, perfect.
Okay, so I was just saying that I've had experience like choosing to attend events when I was, I don't know, like in the process of recovery. There were triggering people there, and then also experiences of no contact and not. And I think like what I want to, like what David said and normalize is that I think, right, like I was hoping that I would avoid pain by either like attending or not attending, but like I just want to normalize that, like whatever you decide or whatever your choice is, there's often going to be like really difficult aspects of that either way.
Yeah.
And I really liked what Lota said, which is that, like, how do we support ourselves through those experiences? And it made me think of like bookending is what my mentor used to call it, but what it was like, how do you walk yourself or support yourself before you attend? Do you have a few things that you can kind of ground during the event, like going to the bathroom and like splashing water on your face? And then like who do you connect with after the event if you don't have someone there that's like with you or an ally? And then if you're not attending, right, like how do you support yourself through what I would say is often like the grief of these events? It's like whether you attend or you don't attend often, what I've discovered in my own process is that I'm dealing with grief, right? And if I don't go, I feel the loss of not attending. If I go, I feel the loss of like wanting it to be different. And for so many years, it was just like trying not, like what's the magic solution, the magic way of like going into the holidays where I'm not going to feel hurt. And that just wasn't really realistic. Like what I really needed was like, this is gonna hurt. And so like, how do I support myself the best that I can? How do I pull my support people close, even if they're not attending events with me? Right, not so that I don't just have to like white knuckle and survive my way through it, but that I can really just, give myself some compassion, support, a soft place to land, knowing that it's going to be a messy process, right? It's not going to be perfect. Even if I have plans, I might not do those plans perfectly. But just having them there, right, like, is a safety net of sorts. Like, whether you decide to attend or not, I think as a complex trauma survivor, my tendency when entering like painful situations is just to buckle down and endure it. And part of recovery was learning that like I didn't have to do it that way, that I could ask for help, I could ask for support, I could reach for tools that would, right, like, yeah, just support me through the experience.
So saying no might even feel bad. When you say no, I'm not gonna go, do we need to give an explanation?
Yeah, Lota is correct. You know, circumstances are really hard for different families and different people. But my stance on it is no one needs an explanation. Absolutely. That permission is on the table at all times. But what Sara said is also true, which is every choice you make is going to have good and bad. It's never going to be pain-free. And that's what is a really difficult kind of reality that we work a lot through accepting, is we would love a path that's pleasant and enjoyable and filled with laughter and joy and love as much as possible. The problem is it's always complicated. And for me, it's like, if we can follow inherently like our values, what matters to us deeply, and can we safely pursue what's really important to us, and how do we do that? Knowing that it's going to be messy and it's going to be difficult, and I'm going to have to endure some difficulty in order to gain access to some pleasure at the same time. That's complicated, which is, I think, why we're also highlighting, don't do it by yourself. It's just too hard to navigate all of that complexity alone, and don't take options off the table until we've thoroughly looked at all of them, I think would be the advice that I would like folks to have.
I think that's so spot on. Also, like, I think many trauma survivors are like acting from the other person, or thinking from the other person, like how it will be for the other person. Well, it's really about what are your own values, what's important to you, what helps you, what supports you, and having compassion for yourself, as Sara said. Yeah, I think that was also in my recovery process, still is one of the most important things as subjects, is coming back, that you really choose from here, from yourself, and not from the other person.
Yeah, being driven by things like fear and guilt and shame, those emotions are so powerful, and they, unfortunately, they're sometimes accurate, but they're also sometimes inaccurate, and they don't give us good information. And it gets really hard to know what emotions should I trust to base my behavior on, and which emotions might I try to ignore and try to push forward through anyway. That's where all of that kind of complexity comes through. But I just loved what you guys are saying, just about like, I often talked about going into your gut instincts, try to get underneath some of the kind of crazy chaos on the surface. And then I heard someone say, it's not just going to your gut, but make sure you check in with your heart on your way to your gut. And if you were to combine the two, usually the answer lies in there somewhere.
Yeah, definitely true.
Actually, we have a question from one of our attendees that's very related, isn't specific to what we are discussing. It's like, how do you decline going to a family member's house for the holidays when you are guilted into going by your parents, or heavily emotionally abused after if you are not attending?
Wow.
That's really tough. Like, I mean, because it's like the action is not tough, but the reaction is tough, because if you like don't go and actually do something good for yourself, then still the family members will react. And that's the tough part, like to continue to set boundaries, not just by not going, but also with the things that people are throwing at you after. And yeah, it's really hard also to speak about a specific situation from another person. But yeah, like at least in my situation, eventually people accepted my boundaries, but it was not a smooth process. And I think that's one of the things also, like the discomfort that comes with standing up for yourself, speaking up for yourself. It's a real big thing. And especially when you start setting boundaries with these kind of things, especially because I think this is a really hard one in the example from the attendee. Like for me personally, the reaction from setting a boundary in the beginning was worse than actually setting the boundary. So if I set a boundary with whoever was crossing my boundaries, after that I had so much anxiety that I felt like it wasn't worth it. But in the long run, it is really worth it. So it's like kind of like, yeah, deal with the discomfort. And in this specific situation, I think it's really important that the attendee like maybe talk with other people who feel safe, who are not inside the family, inside the group, to have a support network also for, you know, if things are escalating. So yeah, that's my advice from here.
I think boundary setting is possible. We all talk about it and we describe it as though it's like an easy thing. And I think we all know that it's not. And so part of, I think what I would highlight with this is it's a skill, and like any skill, it needs practice. And I know we're kind of late in terms of like the holidays are upon us. But setting a boundary like this with a family, I would argue, is almost like a professional level boundary skill setting degree of complexity. And so what I would like to encourage is practice setting boundaries with easier topics so that you get stronger in your boundary setting skills, so that when you do need to deploy that strategy with harder people, you're stronger with it. Because what Loda said is correct. In the short term, this is going to be distressing and difficult, but in the long term, it's going to pay off for you because it's going to get easier and you're going to get stronger. But one of the things with your family is like what we've been talking about is non-apologetically saying, you know, I love you. Maybe you do, I don't know, but I'm not coming. I'm sorry. Goodbye. I can't make it. Whatever that reason might be. And then be careful about too much back and forth, because when you set a boundary, what that creates is an opportunity for someone to bump against it. And so be prepared. Boundary setting is creating an opportunity for someone to push back on you. And that's pretty much a guarantee. So it's not just setting the boundary, but then it's also being prepared for the pushback.
Yeah.
And be careful with that pushback, because the more you interact with that person, the more pushback you get. And so I would probably suggest set your boundary, make it clear, and then disengage from the person. The boundary's been set. We don't need to have, you know, an ongoing dialogue and subjecting yourself to more guilt, to more shame, you know, to more kind of aggressive feedback from them.
David, I think, I'm sorry.
No, I'm done. Sorry.
Really good point, because I find a lot of trauma survivors struggle with over explaining. So I think you said that well, like, and then that's when they get caught, like in the guilt, it keeps piling up. And then, like you said, that back and forth and that back and forth. So the boundaries set, and work with your friend or your client, whomever it might be, just to be firm, like, don't respond, or if you're going to respond at all, this is what you might say. Or because I find that's a hard dynamic for people to not try to explain themselves away, because their guilt is getting hooked.
Remember to prepare. So when you set the boundary, you can probably, these people, you can probably predict what they're going to do once you set that boundary. Think about what they're going to do and have a response to some degree prepared. Maybe you can role play it with a friend or a therapist, like practice your responses ahead of time if you can. In other words, preparation there's just no making up for being prepared to the best of your ability. There's going to be surprises. We can't prepare for everything, but some things we can predict.
Yeah. Wow, this great. And I think our attendee is happy with the response. So it was helpful. So, thank you so much. And please keep asking questions. We're happy to take them. There is actually another one that is moving us to, now we are going to that event. How can we avoid dissociating, which is one of the things that can happen is one of the symptoms and one of the things that can happen.
Oh, that's a good question.
Really,
My thought on that is like, well, first, my initial thought was like, it's okay if you dissociate. Let's just say that. Like, there is going to probably be levels of dissociation, especially when you're entering, like, part of what I think is like dissociation is inherently protective. And when you're entering environments where you don't feel safe, it makes sense that that protective instinct would show up, and you would find yourself, you might find yourself disconnected from how you're feeling or your body or that kind of stuff, because your body knows it's not in a safe place, right? So like, or that this person that you're talking to is not safe. So I want to, again, I love what David said, like normalizing and just like saying like, this is complicated, but like, how can we, like Pam said, like slowly and gradually help our nervous system stay in the present. I kind of like think of these as like intentional dissociators, but really what I mean is like intentional moments where you get to like check out, like literally from the situation, whether that's like going outside and being in the cold, if it's cold where you are, and feeling the cold, because that helps you get back in your body, or going for a walk, even if it's just around a block, or
Bike ride.
a bike ride, like planning movement into, where you're going to be, going to the bathroom, right? Locking the door and just like washing your hands or something, right? But like intentionally.
Maybe grabbing your keys. I always tell you, if you're at a party and you're stressed, just dig in your purse. If you're a female, at least dig in your purse and grab your keys or something.
Yeah. Like I carry, like, this is just a total like thing from like a souvenir shop, but like I carry objects like this with me or in things like this because it helps my body ground and it helps me stay connected. So it's like I have jackets full of rocks and like little things because, right, it helps my body connect, and like like things, even, or just like things that are meaningful to me that remind me like I'm here, I'm okay. So like even if you just had in your pocket, I don't know, right? Just something that reminds you of you or something safe. But it's like, I would say, like, how do you find moments where you can reconnect? But like Pam said, just like gradually and slowly knowing that like your body is also responding to the lack of safety in that environment, and that is a reason, a good reason why it's like I'm out. Like I don't want to be here. So it's like, I would say it's like pendulating. It's like allowing your body, noticing when you kind of start to disconnect, and then, in little ways, just inviting yourself back. Knowing that that's probably going to be like, you're going to be coming in and out maybe a little bit through that process.
Maybe open the Mira app.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I just, I think what
I
Sarah's
think you
saying,
said that, Sarah.
it's
So
just really
yeah.
important to understand that continuum of dissociation from mild to more severe. And just like remind everyone, all of us dissociate.
Mhm.
All like at different times. We use that skill and that kind of protective mechanism all the time. And so just because dissociation is present doesn't mean it's bad. It might actually be really good for you on the mild end to deploy that strategy to disconnect a little bit. So inherently, I wouldn't want to say it's bad. The degree of might be. And that I think when Sarah's saying about like with these grounding tools, that's what happens. We get lost inside. And one of the ways to ground is to get back outside. And so Sarah's talking about have things in your hand, temperature changes, push your feet into the floor and feel the ground underneath you. Squeeze your legs.
I was going to say, do a body check, do a sensory check in the room, the colors, and
For me, my breath really helps, especially when it's mild dissociation. Usually breathing and feeling my feet on the floor can already be enough, like to become more present again. And yeah, I think it's for everyone to explore like what works for you, because it's really different for everybody. And it's also a whole journey. So yeah, it's different for everybody. But for example, also like focusing on certain colors. Also with the Mira app, I use that a lot for this tool. Or like structures or counting. I did plenty of counting windows, trees, I don't know what, but just to stay present or to not go further into dissociation. So also experiment with it, like what works for you, and educate yourself maybe also on what kind of strategies there are, because the ones Sarah said those are also really great and helpful. And what works for Sarah might not work for another person, and the other way around. So it's really about exploring yourself and what works for you.
I guess I'm going to repeat myself, but it's okay. Practice and prepare is, I think what Loda's saying is like, you know, it's hard to ground. And if you haven't practiced, I use this analogy all the time. I'm a sport guy. And so I talk about like, if you got to shoot free throws in a game and you haven't been practicing, your anxiety is going to interfere with your performance. But if you've been practicing ahead of game time, your muscle memory will take over, your performance will be better. So the more you practice and prepare for game time, the better your performance is going to be.
Yeah. Yeah, and also like if you have the opportunity to do so, like I had somatic experiencing therapy, and that has helped me so much with understanding the body's signals, the body's responses, and also learning all these skills of grounding and being in the present moment. And because of that, other things were also shifting, and then it's becoming more and more easy to stay present.
I might just add that, like, because I'm like reflecting on my most earliest years in like recovery, and I think like retrospectively, I can see that my window of tolerance is like, it's like paper thin, right? Like it is not very big, like what my nervous system can tolerate in terms of like input and triggers and people and all the things. And I think like I was starting to learn some of this, right? Making plans and preparations. And I think I would walk through that and I would feel like I failed because I didn't pick up all the tools that I had set in place, or the plan didn't go how I want, or like I got in there and the plan just was totally out the window, right? If I look at, you know, back then, I think I come out of those and think like, I'm not getting any better. Like I just keep failing. Now I would look back and say like, really though, every time I'm, you know, like setting out tools and thinking about it and planning, and walking through it, and like my window of tolerance is widening, right? It might not feel like it in the moment. It can feel like I didn't do the things I said I was going to do. But it's taken, and the perspective, like years, and maybe even like decades, right? To go from a paper thin window to a window now that tolerates quite a bit at the holidays, and can navigate it with compassion. But if you're like in the beginning and you attended an event and you felt like it was a complete disaster, even though you had plans and you had prepared, I would say it's not a failure, right? Like it is a practice. That is a perfect word. And that like in many ways we are healing and growing, but we don't see it yet, right? Like just the process that we even like prepared it all and we walked through and it kind of all fell apart. That's different than what we had done before, right? And then the next time we do it. And I would just say that like my experience is these words like practice, slow, gradual, right? Like are really important, because like when our windows are so thin, right, we can't expect to go in and be able to implement everything we want to implement right from the beginning. So just know that like gradually, it's like, you know, like it's like this.
It's a slow process. That's
Yeah.
Really well. That's a great explanation of that, Sarah.
Yeah.
Growing tolerance and the healing that comes over working at these issues for a long time.
Yeah, and I think I just think about myself back then and the frustration and the shame and like the anger I feel at myself, because it's like I know better sometimes, but like my nervous system's like still, right? And it's like now where I am today, I look back and I go, like, oh darling, like you were doing so well, like you were really trying, like and stuff was happening, like I was healing, and I was growing that capacity. But if you are a person that's like, it does not feel like it's growing, I would just say I understand that, and practicing is a messy thing, right? Like it's definitely not a perfect thing. You will feel like you're falling and stumbling and kind of just, right, falling your way through it, but it's making an impact.
Yeah, and to add to Sarah, like I recognize it so much what you're just telling. And I remember that, for example, friends told me when I said like, it was a disaster, it didn't go well, and this happened, and then my friends were always like, but you went. And that's the whole thing. And then actually, if you went, and if it was the plan to go, you already succeeded, no matter what happened at the event, no matter if you like, you know, dissociated or whatever happened. The fact that you went is already like mission accomplished.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think like as I'm a therapist that does a lot of prolonged exposure work for survivors with PTSD, and I think I don't love I would rather say I'm more of a behaviorist if I'm going by what Lota's saying, because for me, going is going to promote learning. We're going to learn something. We're going to learn that things don't go well, that my strategies suck, that I deployed something good. We're going to learn something that's going to help us again down the line. Not going, we're not going to learn anything. We're not going to get new information by not trying. And so part of what I'm always trying to encourage is, can we try? And if we fail, can we learn? For me, it's always about new learning. New learning almost never grows out of an utter avoidant approach. And so if we can avoid less, that means we're going to learn more. And I think what Sarah's saying is that's how your window goes from here to here. Your window grew because you tried. Your window doesn't grow, though, if you don't try and fail. And I think that's really a hard idea to sell people on.
Sure. Yeah, when I would say like, right, like whether I was choosing to attend an event or not attend an event, right? Like it's the process of walking through whatever that's going to be. If I didn't attend, it was like, okay, if I don't attend, then I'll probably be happy, right? And like be, fine. And then I find myself like uncontrollably sobbing and right. And I'm like then regretting or doubting the decisions, but it's like walking through these processes. It's like, and coming out the other end, like you said, I think for me, the antidote to shame is curiosity, like getting curious, like, oh, look what's showing up today, or like, look what happened there, or that, right? Like, helps me kind of mine those experiences for what you're saying, like ways of learning. It's like setting boundaries and not attending events. What I learned is that, like, that's gonna hurt, even if it's the right decision for me. That's what I learned. And that doesn't mean, or the guilt shows up, and guilt shows up even when the decision's right sometimes, right? Like we're learning to understand ourselves more deeply as we do that. But I think it's very human to be like, what is the solution that doesn't make me have to feel anything, learn anything, right? Like we are pain averse. And so it's like maybe just turning towards curiosity with what you feel, given whatever experience you decide.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, I think we went through what happens, how do we go or not go, what happens while we're there, and how do we go and deal with what afterward, whether it went good or bad. I wanted to, we have about 10 minutes left. I wanted to have one particular question to each of you that is a little more specific and kind of wrapping up a little bit. I will start with the professionals. So David, you are prolonged exposure expert, and well, the holidays are kind of exposure altogether, but I know you are not ever saying to people to go to uncontrolled exposure. So what should we learn or think that is what is right, what is a right exposure for people?
So in our therapy, we are trying really hard to be thoughtful and intentional and purposeful in the exposures that we design and plan for. We really put a lot of thought and effort into why am I going to do this? And what am I going to try to learn from doing this in order to make it worthwhile? So there's always a goal in mind. It's not just to take a risk for the sense of taking a risk. It's not a good enough reason. And the risk should be minimal, meaning I'm not asking people to, I often use the example when you go to the zoo, the tigers are on this side of the glass and we're on this side. We don't ask you to go to the zoo and go into the lion's den. That would be stupid. That's a risk that is too vulnerable. We're not asking to take really vulnerable, risky risks, but it's going to feel risky. It's going to feel like we're going into the lion's den. So we're really putting a lot of thought and effort into it. The problem is that the world is not. The world isn't putting thought and effort into what it's going to present to you. And we call those our naturalistic exposures, environmental exposures. And they often don't come when you're ready for them. So part of what we're also doing is preparing for these naturalistic world exposures that aren't going to follow a nice hierarchy of planned, intentional, purposeful learning experiences. And so that's where we're going to use exactly what we're talking about is sometimes we're going to need to avoid. Sometimes we're going to need to withdraw. Sometimes we're going to need to protect ourselves because the world isn't going to do that for us. And so it's a mixed bag of how do we prepare ourselves to take risks? And how do we protect ourselves when risks come our way that we're not prepared for? It's a tough balance, but I like to differentiate between a purposeful planned exposure versus something the world throws at you that we're not necessarily ready for. Those are two different things.
Okay, thank you. So Pamela, you already mentioned a little bit on that. So with your religious trauma expertise, is there anything else you would want to add on how to deal with the holidays and the things that?
No, I think David, you said it well. Is you're planning. I guess I would say I use some variation on that, like narrative exposure, because part of my work is really working in the long term. I also help people create a new narrative, but through exposure. So I think to answer your question though, specifically, Sylvia, it's really, again, it's like that both ends, right? You're preparing for the unexpected. Like I have let's say you go to mass or something or church and I have a panic attack, even though I'm sitting right in the back corner and there's a door right there. Okay, so I go out, you have a plan to go out and do all those things we talked about. But if it happens, it happens. And even if you're by yourself, you have some tools to get through. So you prepare in therapy or the tools for the unexpected, and then the plan for what am I going to do? Because obviously, that's the saying, the best laid plans, you know. So I think, David, I like the way you said it so eloquently, more eloquent than I just said it. But in the long run, again, but the point is, whether you go to your a toxic or historically toxic family or another setting that is reminiscent of being toxic, you're trying to heal, you're trying to move ahead. And again, it is okay not to go. So we just want to stress that idea, to have your permission and not to have to make a million excuses. It's okay just to say no.
Right. Thank you. Now, that's Sara and Amanda. When you start with Sara, would you share with us an example of when you dealt with it, the situation, the holidays, whatever, that it went well? You feel proud of how you did it.
Is it okay if I go first? Because I have a time crunch here.
Oh,
Yeah,
yes,
I know.
I like this question, and I actually was like, I'm going to share what my year looked like this year, because I find one of the things that I feel most often now is hopeful, which is something I like to pass on, because I know, you know, over the years, I have not had as much hope as I do right now. And I would say that this holidays, it looked like a variety of things that we've talked about. I did attend some family events, or I have and will, and there are others that I am not attending. I had an unexpected contact from somebody that I am no contact with. So that has surfaced a trigger or pain or grief. What I notice about myself today that I think is the biggest change is like, how is my relationship with myself through that entire process, where before I would be really shameful and judging and critical of what was showing up inside of me and how I was handling things and what I was attending and what I was not attending. What I find that years of practice, lots and lots of practice and curiosity have helped me arrive at is that there's room for me to show up in my complexity, right? Like returning to where we started, which is that I am feeling layers of grief. I also am open to moments and layers of joy, right? I'm able to lean into the complexity of both experiences and not feel so much that they have to compete with one another, that I trust my decisions as they exist today, knowing that I'm going to keep growing and shifting and changing, and I can change my mind. But the hopeful thing for me is that it's not pain-free. It doesn't stop hurting, but the way that I operate and relate to myself through that experience is what gives me hope, because it's generally curious, compassionate, kind, right? Like I'm giving myself slack and space and room to just be as I am. And that actually feels very healing, right? Like life doesn't look perfect, and a lot of the holidays have layers of grief. But my relationship with myself is what's healed a lot. And so the way I walk through that feels really, really different, and it feels mostly hopeful.
Wow, that's really
Beautiful.
that's beautiful.
Congratulations, and you'll have a fantastic holiday season. I'm sure of it. Lotta, do you want to share one of your experiences?
Yeah, like, well, the successful experience was, I think, the one that I described with going by bike, and because back then I had like much more like symptoms, and my window was much smaller, and actually that Christmas went really well because I planned everything, and because I made the time being with that whole group of people like you know, small and like, yeah, like also a very firm boundary of when I would go, and that really helped. And I must say this year, yeah, also I've been growing throughout the years in the whole healing, and I'm not really like, yeah, I haven't even thought about how I'm going to do things, because right now, of course, I will, you know, encounter probably situations where I'm like struggling, but then I'm now skilled enough, I think, to deal with it in the moment. And yeah, all I want to add to everything that's already being said is that from day to day, the whole process of healing might look like nothing is happening, but you know, if you keep continuing taking steps, maybe 1 year from now or 10 years from now, it doesn't matter, but you will see eventually that it will pay off. And yeah, I think that's this hope that Sara was also talking about, like once you start to see like, hey, my window is growing bigger, hey, I'm actually able to do this without being majorly triggered. That are the small wins, and that are also the moments that are giving you this hope for a better future. So yeah, I just want to add, you know, to everyone seeing this, like, just keep on hoping, and if you don't feel hope right now, search for it, and just, yeah, try to find this little sparkle inside, you know, that says like things will get better.
Thank you. That was beautiful as well. Thank you so much. And I think that will be a perfect way to conclude. I want to throw one more thing for people to take away here, and it's coming from us at Mira. We are gonna have a sales offer for the holidays, because we do mean it. We want to get people help as they go through it, and hopefully the things we have there are especially useful to you in the grounding side. And that would be it. I hope you had a lot of very good feedback and insights with that. Keep following us. There is more to come. Our Instagrams. Follow all these wonderful people that we had in the panel: David, Pam, Lotta, and Sara, who had to go because of her kids. And I think now I will dare to say happy holidays.
Yes.
Yes.
And one thing I just want to end, if you don't mind, Sylvia, is like I often say to my clients, especially in the early part of our work together, is like, I know, because at the beginning, you know, Lotta, you know, you don't have hope, and I'll say, well, I'll hold on to hope for you, that you're going to heal, because I know healing is possible.
It is.
Within you, you have that strength.
Yeah, that's so true.
And what a better time of year than to talk about hope, right? We're supposed to be talking about hope right now, right? That's this time of year.
Absolutely. Keep going and staying strong and staying encouraged. It will happen. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, Silvia, for the invitation.
Yeah, thank you for hosting.
Take care, everybody. It's
Take care. Nice to meet you all.
Likewise, nice to meet you all.
Thanks, Sylvia.